An estimated 50 million people deal with some sort of allergy. Out of that 50 million, 5 people die every day from allergy-related complications. Just thought I'd share that little fun fact before I told you guys what my life's become. As a child, I didn't have any issues with allergies. It wasn't until I got into a car accident as an adult that the problem started. I was hospitalized for close to a month due to a drunk driver blowing through a red light and T-boning my car. The doctors said it was a miracle. No broken bones and no permanent damage. But they were wrong. I had been out of the hospital for about a week when it started. Even though none of my bones were broken, I was having a lot of trouble walking because of the pain. So I spent most of my time laid up watching movies and playing video games. One afternoon, my girlfriend came by to drop off some food and check up on me. When she walked through the front door, I instantly started sneezing. "Bless you. I bought some of your favorites and I've got a little surprise for you in the bottom of the bag." She walked over and sat the bag near me as she leaned in and gave me a kiss. "I don't have a lot of time. I have to get back to work, but I'll come over tonight." She gave me another kiss and told me she loved me as she headed out the door. The second she was gone, I dug through the bag and found a small black cigar box with a sticky note. It read, "Save some for me." I opened the box to find 12 pre-rolled blunts that smelled so good I almost forgot about the grub. Setting the box aside, I took out the food. She had gone to my favorite burger place and brought me what's, in my opinion, one of the best burgers on the planet. The Blue Oinker. I didn't waste a second. I chomped through that thing like I'd been starving for days, and when I was done, there was an ice-cold Coke. Not the regular kind either. I'm talking glass bottle best of the breed here. The real deal. Once I had the bottle open, I chugged about a quarter of it and sat the bottle down. As I wiped my mouth, my face started itching and my lips felt strange. First, I just brushed it off, not thinking much about it. But after a few minutes, the itching was getting worse. Wincing and grunting through the pain of getting off the couch, I made my way to the restroom. When I looked in the mirror, I saw little red patches on my cheeks and forehead. After washing my face, I rubbed a little lotion on, and that seemed to do the trick. After about 20 minutes, the itch came back worse than before. Now there was a burning sensation that made my entire body hot and my stomach was bubbling. I leaned to one side to let off a warning shot, but it turned out to be a live round. I sharted. Once I got myself all cleaned up, I took a second look in the mirror. The red patches had clusters of pus-filled bumps, and my lips were ballooning up, turning purple. Panicking and hobbling to the main room, I grabbed my phone and called Samantha. "Hey, I think something might have been wrong with that food. Did you eat any?" She paused for a second. "Why do you sound like that? What's wrong?" I hadn't noticed my voice until she mentioned it. "I'm not sure. I think I might have gotten food poisoning. My lips are swelling up and I'm itching all over." She laughed. "That's not food poisoning. It sounds like an allergic reaction. Go look in the medicine cabinet and get the Benadryl. Take 2, you should be fine in an hour or so." Samantha has a severe peanut allergy. One time I kissed her after eating a candy bar and she almost ended up in the hospital. Anyway, I calmed down, got off the phone, and did what she said. She was right. After a while, the itching went away, and I felt better. The only downside was the pills knocked me out. I slept until she got there. Once she showered and changed clothes, we sat up all night smoking and playing a zombie mod version of GTA. I felt perfectly fine until the next morning. When I woke up, literally stuck to the sheets. My entire body was covered with itchy raw patches and tiny blisters. My skin felt like it was on fire. Samantha opened her eyes, looked at me, and yelped. "Oh shit! What happened? Don't move, baby. I'm calling the ambulance right now." She rolled out of bed, grabbed her phone and her clothes, then rushed to the restroom while dialing the paramedics. I spent the next few days in the hospital. They must have taken every sample known to man, and they still couldn't figure out what was causing such a severe reaction. The only good thing that came out of it was the medication they gave me. By the time I was released, I was completely back to normal. I hadn't been able to see Samantha since being admitted, so walking out of the hospital and seeing her there was the best feeling in the world. She smiled, hugged, and then kissed me, and backed away with a smirk. "At least you don't look like a walker anymore." We laughed and talked all the way to my apartment. We made plans for later, then she dropped me off and headed to work. By the time I made it inside, my lips were swelling up, and it was getting hard to breathe. I rushed to the kitchen and took the pills I had been prescribed. But after an hour, nothing changed. I bundled up on the couch and tried to stay calm until Samantha got there. When she came through the door, my stomach lurched, and bile rushed up the back of my throat. Sour, acidic green fluid poured out of my mouth till I was dry heaving. Samantha tried to help, but every time she got close to me, my skin would turn red and blister up. A wave of pain rolled through me as all my muscles seized, and I started convulsing. She dug in her bag and pulled out an EpiPen, then plunged it into my thigh. A short while later, I was starting to feel better. But I still couldn't be anywhere near her. By the time the paramedics got there, every spot Samantha touched on my body was turning black and leaking thick yellow pus. I spent the next few weeks in the hospital. The black skin was necrotic sores. I wound up losing chunks of flesh from my forearm, shoulders, and left leg, where she had given me the injection that saved my life. When I was finally discharged, we tried everything. But in the end, it was obvious. I was allergic to her. Samantha was the love of my life, and I couldn't be within 10 feet of her without nearly dying. I was heartbroken. We tried to stay together. We talked every day, FaceTimed and played together online. But after a few months, it just wasn't enough. Slowly, my condition took over my life. First, it was fruits and vegetables. The next thing I know, I couldn't stomach milk or cheese. Then it was fish. I was actually okay with that one. Then came to the big one. It was a Monday morning. I got up and stepped out onto my patio to get some air. The light hurt my eyes and gave me an instant migraine. My skin started to sizzle and blister as black splotches freckled my arms. I turned and stepped inside as quick as I could and closed the curtains. Almost immediately, the migraine vanished a few seconds later. My skin was returning to normal, and after an hour, I felt like nothing had happened. I tried to go outside over and over, but it got worse every time. Finally, just after sundown, I tried one last time and it worked. Not only was I able to go outside, but I felt great. I got out and went for a walk for the first time in weeks. For the first few minutes, everything was okay. But as I started seeing more people, I started to itch and decided to call it a night. On the way home, I stopped and picked up some steaks. Red meat had become the only thing I could eat without getting sick, and I had to be extremely careful of how I prepared it. A little too overcooked and I would be puking my guts out till dawn. I walked alone, avoiding getting close to anyone. Just the thought of having an attack sent my mind spiraling into a bad space. Not too far ahead of me, I saw the doors to an apartment complex swing open. A man and a little girl came out laughing and talking. I prayed they didn't come up in my direction, but for a split second, I thought about how happy they looked. And when they turned and walked away, I let out a sigh, then slowed down a little to keep a good distance. By the time I got home, I wasn't feeling hungry anymore. When I got in, I threw the food in the fridge, lit up a blunt, and turned on the news. Everywhere I looked, there was misery. Riots, plagues, death, and destruction on every single channel. That bad space in my head was getting darker by the second. As the days turned into weeks, I fell into a routine. I slept during the day and only went out twice a week for supplies. I avoided people at all cost. It had gotten so bad that a few times I did accidentally bump into someone. I nearly died. I became a paranoid wreck of a human being. Pretty soon, I wasn't leaving home at all. After a few months, that bad space was my whole world. This morning, I stood in the sun just to feel myself burn. And when I couldn't take it anymore, I ducked inside and went to bed. The sound of someone moving around in my apartment woke me up. My stomach sank and I started sweating as I rolled out of bed and grabbed my baseball bat. I snuck into the hall listening to whoever it was shuffle around. It was almost to the front room when I heard a glass shatter on the floor. I rushed in, ready to bash somebody's head in, and as I stepped around the corner, I came face to face with an empty room. No glass on the floor, and not a soul in sight. Once I was 100% sure there was no one there, I tried to go back to sleep. I was just starting to drift off when my phone rang. Shit. I looked over at it to see Samantha's picture lighting up on my screen. I almost didn't want to pick it up, but I did. Hello? There was a short pause. Then the line went dead. I tried to call her right back, but the line had been disconnected. After that, every time I tried to go to sleep, something would always wake me up. I would hear doors slamming, footsteps in the hall, the water would start running, or the television would turn on, but in every single case, none of it would be real. This went on for days. Pretty soon, I was seeing little creatures that looked like a cross between a mouse and a lizard. The little bastards would move things around, so nothing was ever where I left it. I found my shoes in the toilet or my clothes in the oven. One time I found my television in the bed with a bottle of lotion. After a few weeks or so, I must have blacked out. Because when I woke up, I was under my bed and days had passed. I started losing chunks of time after that. I would wake up in different parts of my apartment, and each time the room would be completely rearranged. One night I woke up outside, miles away from my apartment. I barely made it home before sunrise. I tried everything, from tying myself up to handcuffing myself to the bed, and nothing worked. As the days passed, I started finding new things in my apartment. First was a shoebox filled with pictures of people I didn't recognize. Then there was a bag of women's clothing. And recently I've been finding jewelry. I couldn't figure out how or why this was happening, but I was horrified at the thought of myself wandering around in an unconscious state. I ordered a few cameras and set them up all around my apartment. I needed to know what was going on. For the first few days, nothing happened. No blackouts, no missing time. I was starting to think maybe it was a phrase or possibly a side effect of the medication I was on. And then it happened. I woke up in an alleyway, lying in a pool of vomit. My skin covered in blisters, and my right eye was swollen shut. I had no idea where I was or how I'd gotten there. Looking towards the end of the alley, I could see the sun was up. The shade of the alley was the only thing keeping me alive. As the hours passed, the sunlight crept into the alley. I was hiding from it, crouched in a corner behind the dumpster. Minute by minute, hour by hour, I watched it get closer and closer, till I was forced to climb into the dumpster and close myself in. It was hard to breathe at first. There wasn't much in the dumpster, 2, maybe 3 bags, but they smelled awful. As the day rolled on and the heat got worse, so did the smell. I tried to open the lid a few times, but the light would rush in and I would be forced to shut it. I suffered through the day, weak and exhausted. And by the time it was dark enough for me to get out, I felt horrible. I pulled out my phone and used my GPS to get home. It took me close to 3 hours to get back to my apartment. I managed to get there without getting close to a single person. Might have had something to do with smelling like hot garbage, but I call it a win. Over the next few days, my right eye wasn't getting better. My skin turned black and smelled like death. Milky pink fluid leaked from under my eyelid, and the pain was unbelievable. I started downing painkillers along with the meds, and things escalated. On the nights I wouldn't wake up in a different room, I would stay awake chasing those rat lizard things, trying to smash them with my bat. My apartment was a wreck. My neighbors were complaining. And last night when I woke up, I found a birthday cake on my kitchen table. It was blue and white with one of those candles made to look like the number 12 on it. Written in frosting was, "Happy Birthday, Billy." I didn't know anyone named Billy. And I sure didn't know a 12-year-old named Billy. Before I could fully process what I was seeing, a sound nearly stopped my heart dead in my chest. A muffled cry followed by a thud of someone kicking against the closet door from the inside. I closed my eyes and ran my hands across my face. And as I did, the thumping got louder. The muffled cries for help became childlike screams. I just knew at any second the police would be kicking down my door. I jumped up, rushed to the closet, and threw it open. I stood there, staring down at a young boy, bound and gagged in my hallway closet. My heart sank as panic flooded my mind. I couldn't risk touching him, but I had to get him out of my apartment. I held up my hands in an effort to calm him down before I started talking. "I'm going to take the gag off. Please don't scream. I'm not going to hurt you." He looked up at me and nodded his head. Then I stepped over and took the gag off. "I guess your name is Billy, right?" He nodded again. "Okay, Billy. How'd you get here?" He looked at me for a second, like he didn't understand the question. "You brought me here." Those 4 little words hit me with the weight of a sledgehammer. I couldn't breathe. My legs wobbled and my knees buckled, forcing me to sit on the floor. I propped myself up against the wall, watching Billy squirm his way into the sitting position. "Look, Mike, I don't know what kind of weirdness you're into, and I don't care. Please, let me go. I won't say a word about this to anyone." Hearing him call me by name snapped me back to reality. "What did you just call me?" Billy attempted to scoot back when he saw my expression change. "Mike? You walked up and introduced yourself, then offered me $30 to take out your trash." I nodded and tried to keep a straight face. But inside, I was freaking out. "So, how did you end up in my closet?" He was narrowing his eyes at me and tilted his head to the side, blinking like he was thinking about the question. "I was standing in the hall waiting for you to bring the bags out. I heard the door open, then there was a loud pop and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the closet." I shook my head and got up, then went to the kitchen to grab a knife. The cake was gone. I stood there, staring at the empty table, wondering if any of this was really happening. The boy could be a figment of my imagination, and I could have been sitting there talking to a shoe for the last few minutes. I put the thought out of my head and grabbed the knife. I was actually relieved to see he was still sitting there tied up when I got back to the closet. Once Billy was free, I moved across the room and waited for him to go. He stood up and stepped towards the door, opening it as quickly as possible before taking off down the hallway. I couldn't wrap my mind around what just happened. I spent the rest of the night cleaning my apartment, and when the sun came up, I went to bed. The sound of the Jerry Springer chant startled me awake. I rushed to the front room to find Billy, sitting on my couch eating a bag of chips, watching television. "How did you get in here? Leave or I'm calling the cops." Billy turned and smiled at me. "Go ahead and call. When they get here, I'll tell them all about you kidnapping me." I wanted to throat punch the little bastard, but the throbbing pain in my eyes sent me straight to the kitchen for painkillers. I took about 2 steps and heard the sound of a pill bottle rattling. "Looking for these?" I turned to see Billy with my medication. He smiled and slipped the bottle into his pocket. "Here's the deal. I live here now, but look at it this way. As long as I'm here, you don't have to worry about me being out there, turning you in. It's a win-win." The pain in my skull was so intense, I would have agreed to just about anything at that point. All I could do was nod my head and grind my teeth at the maddening itch that was taking over my entire body. "I don't care. Just give me my pills so I can go back to sleep." Billy smiled and leaned back on the sofa while putting the pills out and tossing them to me. When I woke up that night, he was gone. I walked over to lock the door, and as I did, I noticed the chain was on. I stood there looking around for anywhere he could be hiding. I wound up searching the place twice just to be sure. Was that real? It seemed real. It felt real. But I couldn't be sure. I just couldn't tell anymore. The pain in my eye told me it was a time for more pills, and I needed to change my bandage. Standing in the mirror, staring at the black scabbed over mess that used to be my right eye, I realized how insane I must look. Just as I finished putting on the bandage, I heard my front door slam shut, followed by Billy shouting, "Honey, I'm home!" I slowly walked to the front room to see him going through my refrigerator, looking for food. "Jesus, why is there never anything to eat here?" He slammed the fridge closed and turned to look at me. "You really should get out more. It's not healthy to stay cooped up in this apartment all the time. You might go nuts." He smiled and strolled over to the couch, scooping up the remote as he took a seat. I glanced over at the front door to see the chain hadn't moved. This wasn't real. Anger took over, and I stormed towards the little shit. I got within a few feet before that horrible itching sensation rolled through my body, stopping me in my tracks. "Get out of here now, or I swear to God I'm calling the cops." Billy sprung up from the couch and took a step towards me, forcing me to step back. "What are you going to tell him? The kid you tried to kidnap is in your house and won't leave? Yeah, that should work out really well for you, Mike. He took another step, and I backed up, bumping into the wall. Stay away from me, I blurted out, retreating into the hall. He advanced as I turned and bolted to my room, slamming the door shut and leaning against it to keep it closed. Billy pounded on the door, screaming for what felt like hours. And just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, everything went silent. I sat there, listening for any signs of movement. But there was nothing. Just the low hum of my air conditioner. Slowly, I cracked the door open and looked down the hall. If he was still in my apartment, he was doing one hell of a job staying quiet. Grabbing my bat and easing out, I worked my way to the front room. He was gone. I looked over at my front door to see the chain swinging freely, and my heart dropped. A surge of overwhelming panic flooded through me, and my chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. This was real. A million different thoughts flashed through my brain as I broke out in a cold sweat. I rushed to the kitchen and grabbed my meds, popping 2 or 3 in my mouth like candy. Standing there chewing and looking around my kitchen, I spotted a bottle of whiskey I'd picked up a few months ago. I didn't know how my body would react to it, and I didn't care. I walked over and grabbed a glass. The first sip was fantastic. Before I realized I'd emptied the cup, I poured another, then took the bottle and sat at the kitchen table. 2 became a few, and the next thing I knew, I was drunk. I got up from the table, took 2 steps, and the room started spinning. By the time I made it to the couch, it was lights out. I didn't have to open my eyes to know where I was. The smell of her perfume was burned into my brain. I could never forget it. For a split second, I smiled. That vanished the instant I opened my eyes. There was blood splattered everywhere. My entire body was inflamed, itching and covered in blisters. My hands were wrapped in blood-soaked towels, and some of my fingertips were turning black. What did I do? I sat up looking around Samantha's bedroom. There was a trail of blood that looked like someone had been dragged away, and bloody handprints all over the restroom door. Nervously, I got up and stepped towards the restroom. Tapping on the door, I stood there praying I would hear her voice from the other side. But there was nothing. Not a sound. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and pushed it open to see it was clean. Not one drop of blood anywhere. Searching the apartment top to bottom, I came up empty. There was no body. No sign that she'd been there at all. Desperate to figure out what happened, I made my way back to the bedroom. And when I got to the door, my jaw dropped. The pools of blood were dry and old-looking. A thick layer of dust coated the room as if no one had been there in months. Looking around, I could see cobwebs hanging from the lamps, and the room had been completely rearranged. Stepping back, stopping against the wall, I started gasping for air. The hall felt too small, and it felt like the walls were getting closer by the second. Stumbling into the front room, I saw dust-covered moving boxes, and the furniture was covered in plastic. I panicked and bolted for the front door. As I reached out for the knob, I noticed the bloody towels were gone. My hands were clean. I paused for a second looking at my hands and clothes, then flung the door open and took off running. I had made it home just before sunrise. I spent an hour looking for my medication, eventually locating it in the shower soap dish. The thought of Billy popping back up freaked me out so bad I checked and double-checked all the locks before barricading myself in my room to try to get some sleep. Drowsy from the drugs, I tossed and turned, contemplating what might have happened. I couldn't live with the idea of hurting her. But there was so much blood. Why couldn't I remember? What couldn't I remember? Did I do this? Could I? No, there's no way. There's no way I would have done that. I loved her. She was my world. After a few minutes, the drugs took over, and I drifted off without an answer. I dreamt I was floating, surrounded by strange white blurs of light that seemed to hover around me. I could hear voices, but the words didn't make any sense. They were muffled and distorted. The sound of Billy slamming against my door screaming jolted me awake. When I sat up, the noise stopped. Dead silence. A tapping from the window sent chills through my body. I didn't want to look. I tried to ignore it, but the tapping became banging, and the window shattered as someone came tumbling in, getting tangled in the blanket I was using as a curtain. Sunlight flooded the room. I shielded my eyes and rolled out of bed, making a dash for the closet. I slammed the door shut just in time to hear Billy yell, "You can't hide forever!" He pounded on the door and jingled the knob that I was clutching from the inside. I felt confident that this kid couldn't overpower me, and snatched the door open. But he was strong. I don't mean strong for a kid his age. I mean it took a serious effort to keep the door closed. Billy screamed and pounded at the door. "Get out of here and face what you've done!" I didn't know what he's talking about. What had I done? What did he know? I yelled back, "Go away!" As tightly as I was gripping the knob, I could feel it turning in my hands. Bracing against the frame of the door, I did what I could to keep it closed. But it wasn't enough. The door came flying open. The closet filled with blinding white light. And everything stopped. For a moment, I was floating in a blinding void. I heard a voice somewhere above me talking. "This drunk piece of shit ran a red light and killed a family of 4. But he survived? How is this justice?" As the light dimmed, I found myself staring up at the night sky. But only out of my left eye. Another voice chimed in. If I had it my way, I'd let him bleed out, but we've got a job to do. Go get the cart so we can get him loaded up. I let my head flop to one side and spotted a heap of broken glass and twisted metal, smoking in the intersection. 4 broken bodies were laid out on the concrete. The first one I saw was him. It was Billy. Lying next to his corpse was a young girl, her lifeless eyes staring out at nothing. Next to her was a man missing a large section of his face. I recognized them both from the night on the sidewalk. They looked so happy back then. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I shifted my one good eye over to the last body. Tears rolled down my cheek the second I saw her. It was Samantha. I lost both my legs and my right eye in the wreck. Thanks to my insane rambling about a life that never happened, I was found unfit to stand trial and committed to an asylum. I spent all my time locked away in a dark room, hiding from the sun. No one's allowed to touch me. I mourn the loss of my love, every second of every day. The pain never goes away. This is hell.
Chronicler here. We here at Creepy Spaghet would like to thank Getyaisha for allowing us to tell their story. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to stay updated on these terrible tales, and make sure to check out the author in the links below. If you're interested in having your story narrated, be sure to reach out to our humble overseer, as he continues his journey to pull the darkest stories from the infinite depths of the internet. Until next time, fiends. And remember, we are darkness.